important that even when we join the congregation, we join the religious life because we want to serve the Lord and serve the people. We don't join the congregation to become the superior, to become a leader, to become responsible for something. But among all the services in the religious life, we are called to take up or to be servants of. The service of leadership is one of the most delicate areas of the service in the religious life. And in the document, is not already a recent document, but it is the last document that the congregation of the religious and of the Institute of the Consecrated Life has gifted us with, the document of new wines in new wineskins. While talking about the authority, they say that it is important to include a serious initiation into government in continuous formation. And we can also say, if it speaks about the initiation, we can also say from the very beginning of the religious life, whatever we learn, whatever we internalize, it should be a preparation in view for every service. Because sometimes, as we realize that these services are taken up with improvisation and carried out improperly and incompletely, because we take for granted that since she's religious, so she knows what does it mean. So she can be a leader, she can be a superior, or he can be a leader, he can be a superior. But there are other skills that we take for granted, and unfortunately, when we lack these skills, we may also not only fall in our life, but we also make others suffer. So my objective in these two encounters is to, instead of fostering improvisation, although in the missionary life it is a good quality to know how to improvise, but rather we want to improve. We want to improve in the religious life and also in the service of the authority. So instead of improvisation, we want to improve. So in these encounters, I would like to invite you to together realize that the service of authority is inscribed in the community. So first, we will speak about the community, and later we will speak about the leadership in the community. I also want that we realize and we raise a reflection, not only in the midst of us here in the course, but in your communities, reflection on the ways of exercising authority and leadership. And I want you also to collaborate, once we realize the changes we have to make, to collaborate in the change of paradigm of authority, and provide spaces of dialogue in our midst, in our religious communities, to transform the service of the authority as the life is changing, as the religious life also is changing. So we would start from this point, that the community is source and place of growth. So if there is no community, there is no need of leadership or exercise of the authority. Before we continue, I invite you to follow with me this prayer, the prayer which was made by a superior of the community while taking up the responsibility. And it was a realization, it was a, let us say, manifestation of the care the sister was willing to embrace. So if anyone wants just to open the mic and recite slowly this prayer when we follow the words, it will be great. This can be a prayer of ours because we are all responsible for taking care of one another. Doesn't matter if we are the superiors or we are just members of the community. Now, of course, in our experience of everyday life, we all have experience of the community. Some of us have been living in maybe in many communities already. Some of us have lived in few communities. So I invite you to take a small paper and recall your experience of the community you have been living. Just let us take a moment of reflection, few minutes, to recall the different communities you have passed by, where you have lived. You can make a short list of the communities where have you spent your life from the beginning till now, or maybe the most important communities, if there are many. So how many communities you have lived in? Mm-hmm. And in your memory, are all communities in the same level of good experience you have? Maybe some were more difficult and some were more easy experiences. Sometimes in the same place, but because one person changed, the whole community changed. So recall your good experiences of the community and think for a while, what made this community good for you? Why you say that this experience was good? What are the reasons that this community was good for you? Was it because there were good relationship? Was it because all of sisters were involved in the mission and well shared? Was it because the superior was really animating the community and bringing all together? Was it because my brothers were supportive for one another in the vocation, especially when there were moments of crisis? What was really making this community good for you? You can write a few words about for you. And recall also these experiences in which the community was a difficult time, was a difficult experience you carry. And what do you mean by it was a difficult experience for me in that community? So what has made this community experience difficult for you? It was because of you, or there were situations that made difficult the reality? So write few words about this. So most of us, we have this wonderful experiences of the communities, and we also have difficult moments of the experience in our communities. And it is nice to reflect upon, because our ground of experience often influences our vision of the community and the ways we want to behave. So from one side, of course, the community is mainly a space where we live out our vocation, where we share the project of our charism, of our service, of our relationship. This is the place where we take care of one another. We have provided places of prayer, of recreation, of studying, of working together, planning together. So this is a reality which is, let us say, spiritual, which is the first and most important aspect of the life of the community. But at the same time, the community has also its organizational aspect, and it has its program, and it has its project. It has in its common lines of scheduling, behaving, programming, spaces which are common, care, and exercises of everyday life which are shared and organized. So in the community, these two aspects should be always balanced, so that the organizational and programming aspect will not take advantage over the spiritual and shared life experience. And on the opposite side also, when there is a good spiritual health of the community, but there is a lack of organization, lack of boundaries, lack of cohesion made out of common project, also with time, the mutual support in the journey will become more weak. So your community, where you are now, what your community looks like. When you see your community, how it is. Is it the archipelago of lonely islands where all tasks are well done, but there is no mutual relationship? We don't know each other. Yes, we share the doing, but there is a lack of experience of shared prayer, sharing of faith, when there is lack of real and true relationship. So these communities exist. The communities like Indonesia islands, that every island is one world, is one cosmos. No? And also in our communities, sometimes even we share the same house, sometimes there is a lot of loneliness in each other. Or maybe your community, our community, looks like the community of apostolic tasks, where everybody knows what to do, when to do, who do, where to do. It is the very organized community where everything is on the board in the good frames, and at any moment we know who is doing what and where and who is in charge of. But actually there is no assimilation, there is no interiorization of common goals and belonging. We do together things, but we have less sense of home, of brothers, of sisterhood. Or what is my community looks like if the community is pretending too much uniformity, that there is a lot of care of common behaviors, of equal behaviors, of similar scheduling, and there is very less space for handling differences. The differences are with difficulty accepted. If somebody is not present in the common prayers, we are all alarmed why she's not here. Or if somebody likes praying in the garden instead of the chapel, we are all alarmed. Or when somebody is thinking in a different way, we are alarmed. Especially when somebody is manifesting more vulnerability, maybe psychological crisis, maybe some difficulties in the health, we are alarmed. So is my community looking like that field of tulipans that everyone wants to be the same in order to achieve the same level best in everything? Or is my community really safeguarding in shared encounters the mission and the vision of the charism today? And the main preoccupation of my community is how to keep alive what is the core of our vocation as Salesian, as of Jesus and Mary congregation, as Marists, as Carmelites, as Claretian. Is our community really faithful to the mission and the vision of the charism today? And this is what creates our bonds. So this is very important, because we will ask ourselves who is responsible for this. If the community is like this, or is like this, or is like this, who is responsible for? So in the very traditional way of understanding of the order in the church and in the religious life, in the most often represented ways of organization of the community, the responsible for whatever is happening in the community is who? The superior. Something is going wrong. Who is guilty? The superior. And if the sister is in crisis, who is the guilty one? The superior. No? It responds to the very pyramidal order in which on the top of the pyramid is the superior, which should know everything, should respond to all demands, should respond to all expectations. The superior should know how to handle every problem. the superior should be like factotum, we say, like knowing to do and knowing to address every issue in the community. And all the others layers of this community organization will be just following, accepting, or just bearing the leading of those or that person who is on the top of this pyramid. So in such a pyramidal order, which sometimes lasts in our communities, yes, the responsible is the superior, but it is the real model we want to perpetuate in the religious life, when we know that when we have expectations in the community, we are the first to make and open the way to achieve these goals. No? So this pyramidal structure is no longer valid, no, in our changing times, and Pope Francis is talking about the opposite order. The pyramid should be turned up to down. Because if on the top there is a person who has to be a leader only, and the others are simply executing what he is wishing or he is manifesting, and later he can or she can count on counsel, and later there are group of perpetual sisters who will be just accepting what the superior and the council decided. And if there are juniors, and if there are formandis, and if there are collaborators and workers, gradually they will just follow what the others are deciding. Is this the way of this pyramidal structure that we want to perpetuate? I think no. We see that with the changes of the church, with the new insights, especially of the last two documents we received, the document on exercise of the authority, which was launched in 2014, in 2008 by the Congregation of the Institute of Consecrated Life, and New Wines and New Skins in 2016, I think, was launched, or 17, I don't remember now, I have it here, as guidelines for the exercise of authority in the religious life. So this pyramidal structure is entering the crisis. In some places already there is a process of transformation and looking for another models, and in some other places still is on the way of transformation. So we can ask ourselves, what kind of animation, what kind of change do we need? Do we need any change in living out authority in our communities? What kind of changes? And if there are different changes to make in our communities in a way of exercising authority, which would be the priority to change? Okay, so I would invite you now to 1 minute of reflection in silence, and let us think personally, what is the change we would like to have in a way of exercising authority, and if there are many changes to do, which will be the first one we need to do, the priority. So when talking about the community in the document of fraternal life, this is the document which was emanated from the Congregation of the Religious Life in 1992 about the living in fraternity. The stress in the living out of the community life is always placed in the dimension of the mystery of the church and the mystery of the vocation, which is from the beginning an experience of community. Even though we are called to embrace the vocation on the personal level, and the first experience is always on the personal field, but when we respond to the vocation, we automatically find ourselves involved in the community. That's why the superiors, the leaders in the community, when we expect from them all the capacities to take care for the community, we should be aware of the several dimensions of this care we expect from them. So, first dimension of care that the leaders should provide is the care for the communion. It means that the community experience, although there are differences in experiences, in ages, in mission, in qualities, in everything, because each one is irreparable in the history of God. So care for the communion. And this communion, it is grounded on the experience of faith, but also on the experience of charism, which is convoking us and which is making possible the journey together. And every community is connected to the wider community, which is the community of the province. So again, the leader is the one who is helping to care in the community for the communion within the province. And the province is inserted in the wider community, which is the community of the congregation. So these three dimensions of communion are very important to take care for, because the belonging is every day rooted in the life of the community, but the belonging to the congregation is wider than my community, is wider than my province, is belonging to the whole congregation. And cannot be that the community is in opposition to the province, or that the community does not follow the orientations of the congregation. No? For example, the general chapter is giving orientations about the life of the congregation for this time, and the province has embraced these orientations in the context in which they are working and living, but the community tells, no, we are not feeling that it is our moment to do so. No? So what is the sense of communion and belonging in this community is very weak. No? Then the second area of care, you have mentioned it too, is the care for involving participation of the community members in building up the community, in the responsibilities, in sharing different fields of responsibilities, and also in the decision making. So here really the role of the leader is essential. If the leader involves others in making the decisions, or just others are executors, are those who are just called to implement the decisions which were made. So the care for involving in decision making has in every charism, in every practices or traditions, its own manifestations. There are congregations, they have regular community meetings in which everyone is called to express the visioning, the suggestions, the proposals, the opinions. Some communities have tools for the common reading of the constitutions, and out of the reading of the constitutions or directories or orientations of the government in the place to be applied in the concrete areas of their life or the options. So it depends on the traditions. In the charismatic also level, these spaces for sharing responsibilities and decision making probably are described in your directories, in your constitutions. What does it mean that today the community in the whole expression is called to be a part, to take a role, to be involved in the game, as sometimes we say. Another care on the level of the community is the care for subsidiarity. Subsidiarity is this famous word used by Paul VI, Pope Paul VI, when talking about the different levels of the community and communion in the church. Subsidiarity means that at every level of responsibility, there must be an autonomous possibility of taking decisions. And if I am responsible on my field, I am autonomous in my community, on our level, to take these decisions. But the subsidiarity does not mean independence. The subsidiarity is connected automatically to the accountability. The authority is always accountable to the, let us say, upper level of responsibility and also lower level of responsibility, if we can compare these levels. So there is no authority who can consider herself or himself not accountable. The Superior General is accountable to her council and to the chapter. The Provincial is accountable to the Superior General and to the superiors of the communities. The superiors of the communities are accountable to the provincials and to their members of the communities. So this level of care, I find sometimes is not very well put in practice in our community living. We are thinking that once we have taken the decision, okay, we did, why should I explain the reasons for? We have agreed, that's all. Yeah, but what were the motivations? What are the implications? What are the consequences? Have you thought about? With whom you have dialogued these decisions? The subsidiarity is the autonomy of every level, but remember that the accountability is also the complementary side of every exercise of the authority. And we know how many disasters have happened, still maybe they are happening in the religious life, when we are not exercising the accountability of the decisions. It leads often to the abuse of power. And the fourth area of care of the leadership in the community is a more spiritual and specific care of the life of the community. It is the care for fidelity to the mission and charism. So yes, it is the leadership who is called in a special way to care so that in this community is lived out the fidelity to the mission and the fidelity to the charism of the congregation in the present moment, as community and as a single members. So that's why you have been pointing that the leader, the superior, should know the situation of the sisters and brothers, should know what is the moment of their vocational journey. Of course, we cannot always aspire for the intimate communication, for the very deep knowledge of one another. It is made of respect and also respecting the boundaries of each one. But this sense of fidelity to the mission, to the vocation of everyone, and to living out the charism is very important. And two main tools are here for the exercise of this care. One is taking care of ongoing formation in the community. We know that the community is the habitual space of our ongoing formation. And not only because we have some moments of recollection together or common reading or common study. These are punctual moments, but everyday life is a formation for each one if the liturgy is well prepared, if the dialogues on the table are interesting, if the dialogue, informal dialogue we have with one another are nutritious and really they are helping one another. So formation and accompaniment. Accompaniment is, we have read it in Evangelii Gaudium, that accompaniment is the tool to build community, to establish bonds which are based, which are growing on the level of fidelity to God and to one another. The accompaniment meant not in the very spiritual and strictly on the development of my spiritual life, which we hopefully we have this opportunity to have a specific accompaniment, but the mutual accompaniment in the community is this journeying together, as you have been telling in the chat, journeying together and taking care of one another. So this is also the expressions of new wines and in new wine skins and number 16. So the care for fidelity of the charism is really something very important to us. You have stressed very often the aspect of relationship, of relating to one another, of involving one another. This can appear as a very human dimension of the leadership, but is not so, because in effect, the main role in the transmission of the charism in the congregation has no the leadership, has the community, the communion. You see what the document of new wines in new wine skins states. No authority figure, not even a founder, must think to be exclusive interpreter of the charism or to be excluded from the norms of the universal law of the Church. Because the care of the leadership is to foster the fidelity to charism and to the mission, but is the community who develops, who takes care, who actualize, who put into practice the charism and the mission of the community. Huh? Jesus tells us that wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there present among you. It means that where there is a community, there the Spirit moves. Huh? So it is the community who interprets the charism and the mission. And of course, in the history of the congregations, this community has a special expression, which is the general chapter for the life of the congregation. But every community is somehow this small cenacle where the charism is being translated into concrete style of living and mission. So the leaders should take care of, but they are not the exclusive interpreter of the charism and of the constitutions. They have to be also faithful to them. That's why the identity of the congregation cannot be conceived, cannot be interpreted, understood as something immobile, as something theoretical, but as a process of growth that might lead to overcome the gaps between cultures, generations, and visions. So every person in the community should feel involved and responsible in the community project where the fulfilling of the vocation may be true for each one. And that's why still we can see that if the love of God and of neighbor has gathered us in the community, if the origin of our community is in the call of God and responds to his call, so the only way to really exercise the authority is by sharing the authority. You can also watch how the director of the orchestra is encouraging the students to perform. So both sides, I invite you to watch and learn from this experience. Just a moment. So I will just display a fragment of this because the video is longer, but you just watch and also read because he speaks in German, but the subtitles are in English.
So, hallo Leute, wie geht es? Super? Ja, super, Sie alle hier zu sehen. Und zuerst mein Deutsch, Entschuldigung. Aber, so, können wir Bergkönig spielen? Ja, wir spielen und wir sehen, was passiert, ja? Okay. So, wow. So in Dresden, erste Oboe, ja, Flute, erste Klarinett ist Klarinett 1. Aha. Aha, oh, viel Klarinett 1. Aha, genug, okay. Hörner, Trompete, okay, ja, spielen wir. Wessen Note ist Sarah? Nein? Okay. Unglaublich nett und es klingt unglaublich nett und höflich und wirklich kein Kompliment. Können wir ein bisschen mehr gefällt? Langsamer. Ja, so, ja. Star Wars Battle Droid. Ja? So, nicht zu freundlich. Nur Celli Bass am Anfang. So, bitte nicht. Oder bitte ganz konzentriert und ein bisschen bedrohlich. Ja, ja das. Gut, so, es ist wunderbar, nicht zu schnell, zu bald zu werden. Ja? Wir ein bisschen mehr gefährlich. Gut, ein bisschen weniger Celli, ein bisschen mehr Bass. Ja? 3 und. Oh nein, ja, so, no. Nicht ein bisschen schneller, nur ein bisschen mehr. Ja? Es kommt. Nein, okay, gut, jetzt schlechter und schlechter, gut. So, 3 und. So, und jede Betonung ist wie. Mit den nicht von ja, ja, okay, so, mehr. Ja.
So what does the director of the orchestra do? No? What is his role as the animator of the orchestra? Probably you have noticed different aspects. No? First of all, he lets them play in the first moment. He lets them play, and later he admires everyone, every instrument. So the first approach is appreciative, to say, okay, you are doing well, you are making an effort. But later he says, but I wouldn't give too much compliment. So that's why he later, and if you want, you can watch the full story of this lesson. He goes through every instrument and trying to point out each one's contribution in the whole opera, in the whole work. And he's also animating with the whole his body. No? And do you think that he's inviting to follow him, or he's just doing it for the sake of doing? No? He's really inviting, and it is somehow a pleasure to follow his orientations, because he's capturing the spirit of this music. And of course, he's inviting also to play a concrete rhythm. No? He makes them confident somebody is commenting. No? They gently help them to improve by saying, yeah, you can little more, or you can little slow, or you can little more actively be. But each one should be attentive to the concrete place he or she plays in the orchestra. So if you are cello, play cello. If you are clarinet, so play clarinet. If you are trumpet, play trumpet. If you are violin, play violin. So we know that this image of the orchestra is one of the most beautiful and most expressive representation of the doing of the life of the community. What is the music our community sounds? If our community, if my community is the orchestra, what will be the outcome of our playing instruments? How to encourage one another so that each one produces the best piece of the music, but faithful to what she or he is. How gentle should be the one who directs, so to allow everyone to bring forth the best side of her, of his charism to play the instrument I'm playing. So that's the character of the leadership we would like to have, and we would like to develop in every one of us. And as I have been telling in the beginning, probably we have no doubts how it should be, but maybe yes, we have doubts how really to improve, in which way to improve the way of exercising the authority. So what is the beginning of this learning? Okay. So after seeing this director of the orchestra and seeing at you and your, maybe you have any task in responsibility in your community, in a small field or big field. Some of you or many of you are juniors, so maybe you don't have a big responsibility, but probably you have some, because in the religious life we learn to be careful for others by learning responsibility. So what is the self-observation we can make about our ways of encouraging others, involving others, and guiding others? And what you realize to improve in your service? So I would always go back to this question of self-realization, self-observation, and self capacity of evaluation in order to improve the service of authority. in order to evaluate ourselves, what are the skills I already have and which one I have to develop, we are invited to journey to our roots, to our Christian roots. Today, in the field of exercising leadership, if we enter Google or YouTube or any other platform of programs and classes, talks, we find thousands of different programs which speak about the leadership, especially on the field of companies, on international agencies, and of course, also in the church. But we would like to learn from the Christian perspective, and we would like to learn from the very roots of our vocation. So if the leadership, generally speaking, is just to lead others towards the vision, or it is a directing somebody, pointing the vision and assigning others to accept the vision, or eventually walking with others and involving others in making the path together, these three different ways of exercising the leadership, they are already telling us that it's not easy to make an option in the ways of exercising leadership. By directing, by pointing and assigning, or by really walking and evolving together. Directing others, it means driving and orienting others towards the achievement. For example, in the classroom, the teacher is the leader, but his or her ways of exercising the leadership is mostly by directing others, because she or he has the vision in mind, and just conduct the group to achieve the goals she is precising. Although the pedagogy is also changing, and always more and more also the students are involved in the way of realizing the program, but we can say that in great percentage, the way of teaching is still directive. Then the second way of leading is by pointing the vision and assigning others to accept the same vision, by motivating them, by inculcation, by involving others and really transmitting the idea we want to achieve. This way of exercising the leadership can be very similar in some companies which have very strong spirit of creating common bonds and goals, but they are only external goals and just made for the sake of certain objectives which the company, for example, imagine the company producing the technology of computers, or the company producing cars, or the company selling clothes, etc. Often the companies, they have common goals which they want that everybody in the company is familiar with, but they are just executors, just followers of a shared idea. But walking with others and involving in others in making the path together without prefabricated goals and prefabricated visions is very difficult. But this is the way of actual paradigm shift in the exercising of the authority in the church. And we know it because just few weeks ago, it was a month ago that Pope announced the Synod of the Church, which will start in October 9. But just a few weeks ago, there was a presentation of the document preparing for the Synod of the Church. And the main dynamic of this Synod of the Church is precisely involving all Christians in walking together and discovering together what is the Spirit telling to the Church. So if this paradigm is now opening up in the Church, we as religious should be the first on the line as a protagonist of this change. So walking with others and discovering together what is the will of God for us in the community, in the congregation. So as we were first examining what is the community looking like, we can now examine what is the practice of the leadership more often experienced in our communities. If the directing, if the just pointing and assigning, or really walking with others, involving in together discovery the will of God. I would like that in the time we have till the next encounter, which will be on next Sunday, on Sunday 3rd, because we have made a change with the father who supposed to give on Sunday and I on Saturday, but I have a change. So I would like to invite you that during this week, you go through your directory and the constitutions, and what are the characteristics of the leadership that in your charism are typical, that are fruits of the tradition of the congregation, that are fruit of the development of the ways of exercising authority in your congregation. I would like to invite you to write a half page like that, maybe just half page. And if you can send to Father Robin and then he will send it to me, I will be glad if you contribute with this reflection to our common reflection. So what is the concrete charismatic way of exercising the authority that in your congregation is seen as specific, as something that you have practiced, or at least in the big lines of orientations is present in your spirituality?